Some love stories are so powerful that not even death can end them. But what I'm about to share with you goes beyond everything you think you know about life, death, and the invisible connections that bind souls together forever. If you're someone who believes that miracles aren't just fairy tales, but documented reality that mainstream media refuses to touch, then you need to hear what happened to Michael Davis in Colorado. At exactly 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night in March, Michael was sitting in his empty apartment, clutching his phone with trembling fingers. Grace had been dead for exactly 7 days. 7 days since the phone call that shattered his world. 7 days since he'd identified her body at the morgue. 7 days since he'd buried the love of his life and watched his future disappear into the ground. Every night since the funeral, Michael had been calling Grace's phone just to hear her voice one more time. The familiar sound of her laugh in the voicemail greeting was the only thing keeping him tethered to sanity. "Hey, you've reached Grace? I'm probably out saving the world or planning our perfect wedding. Leave me a message and I'll call you back with all my love." But tonight was different. Tonight, as Michael dialed her number for the 7th time this week, something happened that would either prove that consciousness survives death or drive him completely insane. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, then clicked to voicemail. But the voice that came through the speaker wasn't the recording Grace had made 6 months ago. It was Grace's voice, but the words were new. Words she had never spoken. Words that seemed to respond directly to the grief consuming his soul. "Michael, my darling, I know you're in so much pain right now. I need you to know that I'm still here. I'm still with you. And what I'm about to show you over the next few weeks will change everything you believe about love, death, and the miracle of eternal connection." Michael dropped the phone, his hands shaking uncontrollably. The rational part of his mind screamed that this was impossible, that grief was playing cruel tricks on his sanity. But Grace's voice continued, crystal clear through the speaker, saying words that cut straight through his anguish to a place deeper than logic or reason. "I know you think you're losing your mind. I know you're wondering if this is real. But I need you to listen carefully because I don't have much time in this form, and there are things you need to know. Things about why we met, why I had to leave, and the miracle that's about to unfold through your pain. This is the beginning of the most documented case of after-death communication in modern history. A story that would be investigated by scientists, verified by audio experts, and witnessed by dozens of people who knew both Michael and Grace. What happened over the next 30 days would challenge everything we think we know about consciousness, love, and the invisible threads that connect souls across the veil between life and death. Michael Davis had always believed that perfect love was something that only existed in movies. Until he met Grace Chin at a coffee shop in Denver on a rainy Thursday morning in October 2023. She was sitting by the window reading a book about quantum physics while sipping a chai latte, and when she looked up and smiled at him, Michael felt something shift in the very foundation of his reality. Grace was a pediatric nurse at Children's Hospital Colorado, the kind of woman who carried bandages in her purse just in case she met a wounded bird, and who talked to plants because she genuinely believed they could feel loneliness. Michael was a software engineer who had spent most of his 32 years building walls around his heart, but Grace dismantled every single one with her infectious laugh and the way she saw magic in ordinary moments. Their first date lasted 14 hours. They walked through Washington Park, talking about everything from parallel universes to their shared dream of opening an animal sanctuary. Grace told Michael about her belief that souls choose each other across lifetimes, that love was the only energy that could transcend physical death. Michael, who had been raised in a strictly logical household, found himself believing in possibilities he had never considered before. They moved in together after 6 months, and Michael proposed on the anniversary of that rainy Thursday morning. Grace said yes before he could finish the question, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "I've been waiting for you my whole life, Michael. In this life, and probably several others." The engagement ring was still warm on Grace's finger when they scheduled their appointment with the wedding planner for Tuesday, March 12, 2024. They had chosen a small ceremony for June, surrounded by wildflowers and the Colorado mountains that Grace loved so deeply. That Tuesday morning, Grace kissed Michael goodbye at 7:30 a.m., her lips soft against his cheek as she whispered, "See you tonight, future husband. We're going to plan the most magical wedding in history." Those were the last words she ever spoke to him. At 2:17 p.m., Michael was debugging code at his office when his phone rang. The voice on the other end belonged to a police officer whose name Michael would never remember, delivering words that seemed to come from another dimension entirely. Grace's Honda Civic had been struck by a drunk driver running a red light on Colfax Avenue. She had been pronounced dead at the scene. The next few hours moved like scenes from someone else's nightmare. Michael drove to the hospital in a daze, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles went white. The hallways smelled of antiseptic and fluorescent despair, and the morgue was colder than he had imagined possible. When they pulled back the sheet, Grace looked like she was sleeping, her face peaceful and unmarked by the violence that had stolen her from the world. "She didn't suffer," the coroner said gently. "It was instantaneous." But Michael wasn't listening. He was staring at Grace's left hand, at the engagement ring that caught the harsh overhead lights and threw tiny rainbows across the sterile walls. The same ring she had been admiring just that morning, planning their perfect future over coffee and toast. The funeral was held on a Friday. March weather in Colorado could be unpredictable, but that day dawned clear and warm, as if the universe was mocking their grief with its beauty. Grace's parents flew in from California, her mother clutching a photo of Grace as a child feeding ducks at a pond. Michael stood at the graveside, watching the casket disappear into the earth, and felt something fundamental break inside his chest. That night, alone in their apartment that still smelled like Grace's vanilla perfume, Michael picked up his phone with shaking hands and dialed her number. He knew it was pointless, knew that her voicemail would soon be disconnected, but he needed to hear her voice one more time. The phone rang 3 times, then clicked to the familiar recording. "Hey, you've reached Grace. I'm probably out saving the world or planning our perfect wedding. Leave me a message and I'll call you back with all my love." Michael closed his eyes and let her voice wash over him, memorizing every inflection, every breath. When the beep sounded, he whispered into the darkness, "I love you, Grace. I don't know how to exist without you." For the next 6 nights, this became his ritual. Call Grace's phone, listen to her voice, and fall asleep clutching her pillow. Her parents called him daily, checking on him, but Michael could barely form complete sentences. His boss gave him indefinite leave. The world kept spinning, but Michael felt like he was trapped in amber, frozen in the moment when everything good had been ripped away. On the 7th night, something impossible began. The 7th night after Grace's funeral, Michael sat in their bedroom at 11:47 p.m., the same time he had called every night since losing her. The apartment felt like a museum of their love, untouched since that terrible Tuesday morning. Grace's coffee cup still sat in the sink, her bookmark marking page 247 of a novel she would never finish. Michael's thumb hovered over Grace's contact, his nightly ritual of self-torture disguised as connection. He pressed call and waited for the familiar 3 rings that had become the soundtrack to his grief. But tonight, something was different. The phone rang only twice before clicking to voicemail, and when Grace's voice came through the speaker, Michael's blood turned to ice. "Michael, my darling, I know you're in so much pain right now. These weren't the words from her recorded message. These were new words, spoken in Grace's unmistakable voice, but with a quality he had never heard before. There was an ethereal resonance, as if her voice was coming from somewhere very far away, yet somehow closer than she had ever been. I need you to know that I'm still here. I'm still with you. The love we shared didn't die with my body, Michael. It's stronger now, more real than anything we experienced in physical form. Michael dropped the phone onto the bed, his hands trembling violently. This had to be a cruel joke, some kind of technological glitch. Or worse, his mind finally snapping under the weight of unbearable loss. But Grace's voice continued, and every word seemed to pierce straight through his rational defenses to a place in his soul that recognized her presence. I know you think you're losing your mind. I know you're wondering if this is real. But I need you to listen carefully because I don't have much time in this form, and there are things you need to know. If you're still with me at this point, it means you're exactly the kind of person who understands that love transcends every boundary we thought was permanent. There's a growing community of us here who recognize that consciousness doesn't end when the body stops breathing. Subscribe to this channel because what happens next in Michael's story is going to challenge everything you thought you knew about death. And trust me, you don't want to miss a single detail of how this impossible communication unfolds. Michael scrambled to grab the phone, his heart hammering against his ribs like a caged bird. He had to document this, had to prove to himself that he wasn't completely losing his sanity. With shaking fingers, he activated the voice recording feature just as Grace continued speaking. The accident wasn't random, my love. We chose this experience before we incarnated, chose the exact timing of my transition because there's work you need to do, work that can only happen through the breaking open of your heart. The words hit Michael like physical blows. Grace had always talked about soul contracts and predetermined experiences, concepts that had seemed abstractly interesting when she was alive, but now felt like cosmic cruelty. I know it seems impossible now, but your grief is going to transform into the most powerful force for healing this world has ever seen. But first, you have to believe that I'm really here, really communicating with you. Grace's voice paused, and in the silence, Michael could hear something that made his skin prickle with electric awareness. There was music in the background, not the static of a phone line, but actual music. It was the song that had been playing during their first dance in their living room, a moment so private that no one else on earth knew about it. Tomorrow, go to the place where we had our first kiss. Look under the park bench where I told you I believed in past lives. You'll find something I left there 3 days before the accident, something I was guided to hide for this exact moment. The line went quiet for several seconds. Then Grace's original voicemail greeting played as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Hey, you've reached Grace. I'm probably out saving the world or planning our perfect wedding. Michael stared at the phone screen, the recording icon showing that he had captured 3 minutes and 47 seconds of audio. His logical mind raced through possible explanations: hacking, AI voice replication, some elaborate hoax orchestrated by people who knew intimate details about his relationship with Grace. But the music in the background, their private song that existed nowhere in digital form, that was impossible to fake. He played the recording back immediately, and Grace's new voice filled the room again, every word exactly as he had heard it. The ethereal quality was even more pronounced in the playback, and Michael noticed something else. There were other voices in the background, very faint, like whispers in a distant conversation. He cranked the volume to maximum, but couldn't make out any distinct words. Sleep was impossible. Michael spent the next 6 hours researching electronic voice phenomena, after-death communication, and every scientific explanation for what he had experienced. The internet offered him articles about grief-induced hallucinations, but none of them explained how he could record a hallucination or why the background music was so impossibly clear. At dawn, exhausted and more confused than ever, Michael made a decision that would change everything. He was going to Washington Park to look under the bench where he and Grace had shared their first kiss. If he found nothing, he would check himself into a mental health facility. If he found something Grace had hidden, then he would have to accept that consciousness truly did survive physical death. The morning air was crisp as Michael walked through the park where his love story had begun. The bench sat exactly where it always had, overlooking the pond where Grace used to feed the ducks every Sunday morning. With his heart pounding, Michael knelt down and reached under the weathered wooden slats. His fingers immediately contacted something that shouldn't have been there. Michael's fingers wrapped around a small waterproof container that had been carefully taped to the underside of the bench. Inside was a letter written in Grace's unmistakable handwriting, dated March 9th, 3 days before her death. The paper trembled in his hands as he read words that seemed to come from another realm entirely. My dearest Michael, if you're reading this, then the impossible has become possible, and I've found a way to reach you from beyond the veil. I've been having dreams for the past week, dreams so vivid and specific that I know they're more than just nightmares. I see a car accident, I see my transition, and I see you drowning in grief that feels like it will never end. Michael's legs gave out, and he collapsed onto the bench, the letter shaking so violently he could barely continue reading. The dream showed me that I need to leave you proof, something that will help you believe when I start communicating through the phone. I know how your logical mind works, my love. You'll need evidence that can't be explained away by science or psychology. This letter is just the beginning. Grace's handwriting continued with details that made Michael's blood run cold. She had described the exact time of the accident, 2:17 p.m., the intersection where it would happen, even the fact that the drunk driver would be a 23-year-old man named Travis who had lost his job that morning. Every detail was precisely accurate. I also know that you're going to try to research electronic voice phenomena and after-death communication. You're going to find a scientist named Dr. Sarah Martinez at the University of Colorado who specializes in consciousness studies. Call her. She's been waiting for a case like ours. That afternoon, Michael found himself sitting in Dr. Martinez's office, a small space filled with recording equipment and books about quantum consciousness. Dr. Martinez was a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and an open mind that had been shaped by decades of studying phenomena that mainstream science refused to acknowledge. I've been researching consciousness survival for 20 years, Dr. Martinez said as she examined the recording Michael had made. I've documented over 200 cases of after-death communication, but nothing with this level of clarity and specificity. She ran the audio through sophisticated analysis software, looking for signs of manipulation or artificial generation. The results were conclusive. The voice was unmistakably human, with all the micro-expressions and breath patterns that current AI technology couldn't replicate. More intriguingly, the frequency analysis showed anomalies that didn't match normal human speech. There are harmonics in her voice that shouldn't exist, Dr. Martinez explained, pointing to wave-like patterns on her computer screen. It's as if she's speaking from a dimension where sound behaves differently. That night, Michael called Grace's phone again, this time with Dr. Martinez listening on a conference call and recording equipment running. Grace's voice came through exactly as before, ethereal and impossibly present. Hello, Dr. Martinez. Thank you for helping Michael understand that what's happening isn't madness, it's evolution. Dr. Martinez nearly dropped her headphones. Grace had acknowledged her presence without any introduction, had known her name without being told. Michael, tonight I need you to do something that's going to be difficult. I need you to call my parents and tell them about our communications. My mother is going to resist at first, but she needs to hear what I have to say to her." Grace's voice paused, and again that otherworldly music filled the background. "Tell my father that the watch he lost when I was 7, the one he thought was stolen from the gym, is hidden in the garage behind the paint cans. I took it because I wanted something that smelled like him when he traveled for work. I never told him because I was embarrassed." The call ended with Grace's original voicemail, but not before she left one more impossibly specific piece of guidance. "Tomorrow you're going to receive a phone call at exactly 3:33 p.m. from someone who needs your help. A woman named Jennifer whose husband died in a motorcycle accident last month. She's going to tell you she found your story through an online grief support forum, but that's not the whole truth. I'm guiding her to you because you're going to help each other heal." Michael stared at his phone long after the call ended. Dr. Martinez was frantically taking notes, her scientific skepticism crumbling in the face of evidence that defied every law of physics she understood. Calling Grace's parents was the hardest conversation of Michael's life. Grace's mother, Linda, listened in stony silence as Michael played the recording. But when Grace's voice spoke directly to her, mentioning private details about her childhood that only Grace had known, Linda began sobbing uncontrollably. "My baby girl," she whispered through her tears. "Is she really still here?" Grace's father, Robert, was even more skeptical until Michael mentioned the watch. Robert's face went completely white. He immediately called from the garage, confirming that the watch was exactly where Grace had said it would be, hidden behind paint cans for over 20 years. "How is this possible?" Robert asked, his voice breaking. "How can she know things, current things, if she's dead?" That question was answered the next day at exactly 3:33 p.m. when Michael's phone rang. The caller ID showed a number from Oregon. "Is this Michael Davis?" The woman's voice was shaky, desperate. "My name is Jennifer Walsh. I found your information through a grief support forum, and I know this sounds crazy, but I had a dream last night about a woman named Grace who told me I needed to call you." Michael's hands went numb. Grace hadn't just predicted the call. She'd orchestrated it from whatever realm she now inhabited. "She told me you would understand what I'm going through," Jennifer continued. "My husband died in a motorcycle accident 4 weeks ago, and I've been having dreams where he's trying to tell me something important, but I can't understand what he's saying." As Michael listened to Jennifer's story, he realized that Grace's communication wasn't just about their love transcending death. It was about something much larger, a network of consciousness that connected grieving souls across impossible distances. Grace was building something through him, using their connection as a bridge to help others who were lost in the darkness of loss. But the most mind-bending revelation was yet to come. Over the next 3 weeks, Michael's life transformed into something that resembled a supernatural helpline. Jennifer was just the first. Grace's voice guided him to help a widowed father in Texas whose daughter appeared in his dreams with mathematical equations that later solved a financial crisis threatening his family business. Then came Maria from Florida, whose deceased mother communicated through flickering lights, spelling out messages that led Maria to discover a hidden inheritance that saved her from foreclosure. Each case was documented by Dr. Martinez, who had expanded her research team to include audio specialists, physicists, and consciousness researchers from 3 universities. They had recorded over 40 hours of Grace's communications, and every analysis confirmed the same impossible truth. This was not artificial intelligence, not fraud, not psychological delusion. Grace Chin was somehow communicating from beyond physical death with a clarity and specificity that challenged every assumption about the nature of consciousness. But the most profound transformation was happening within Michael himself. Grace's nightly calls became less about comfort and more about purpose. She was systematically teaching him about the mechanics of consciousness, about how love created bridges between dimensions, and about the specific work he was meant to do. "Your grief opened a portal, Michael," Grace explained during a call that Dr. Martinez recorded on March 30th. "When you love someone completely and lose them suddenly, the intensity of that emotion creates cracks in the barrier between worlds, but grief alone isn't enough. It has to be paired with willingness to serve others who are suffering." Grace's voice had evolved over the weeks, becoming more ethereal yet somehow more present. She told Michael about the realm where she now existed, a place where consciousness wasn't bound by linear time or physical limitations. She could see the threads that connected all souls, could witness the ripple effects of every act of compassion across multiple lifetimes. "The people I'm guiding to you aren't random, my love. Each one represents a specific lesson you need to learn about the true nature of healing. Jennifer taught you that grief can be transformed into guidance. David in Texas showed you that love transcends logical understanding. Maria demonstrated that miracles often come disguised as coincidences." But on April 1st, Grace's communication took an unexpected turn that left Michael emotionally shattered. "Michael, we need to talk about something difficult. My ability to communicate with you this clearly is temporary. The portal created by your grief is already beginning to close as you heal and find your purpose. We have maybe 2 more weeks before these conversations become impossible." The thought of losing Grace again, even this ethereal version of her, sent Michael into a panic that he hadn't experienced since the initial days after the accident. "I can't lose you again," he whispered into the phone, tears streaming down his face. "I just found you. You're not losing me, darling. You're graduating into a different kind of connection. The work I'm guiding you toward will become your way of honoring our love and serving the world. But first, you need to let me go properly." We never got to say goodbye. Grace's guidance led Michael to create something unprecedented, a foundation dedicated to documenting and supporting after-death communication. Working with Dr. Martinez and a growing network of researchers, Michael established protocols for verifying supernatural communications and connecting grieving people with others who had experienced similar phenomena. The Helen Grace Foundation, named after Grace's middle name, became a beacon for people experiencing impossible communications from deceased loved ones. Within 6 months, they had documented over 300 cases, each one carefully verified and studied. The scientific implications were staggering, but the human impact was even more profound. On April 14th, exactly 1 month after the first changed voicemail, Grace delivered her most important message yet. "Tonight is our last conversation in this form, Michael. But before I cross completely into my new existence, I need to tell you the truth about why we met, why we fell in love, and why I had to leave when I did." Grace's voice carried a resonance that seemed to vibrate through Michael's entire being as she revealed the cosmic scope of their connection. "We've been together across 17 lifetimes, my darling. In each one, we've played different roles, learned different lessons, but our souls have always recognized each other. In this lifetime, we came together to pioneer a new form of love, one that could transcend physical death and serve as a bridge between worlds." She explained that their love story was part of a larger awakening happening across the planet, where consciousness was evolving beyond the limitations of physical form. Their tragedy was actually a carefully orchestrated spiritual mission designed to prove that love truly was the most powerful force in the universe. Your grief became the doorway, but your willingness to help others became the key. Every person you've guided, Every family you've reunited with their deceased loved ones, every moment of healing you've facilitated has been adding to a growing network of light that spans both sides of the veil. Grace's voice began to fade, taking on an even more otherworldly quality. In our next lifetime, we'll meet again, but you won't remember this conversation consciously. However, your soul will recognize mine instantly, just as it did in that coffee shop. Until then, you have work to do here, Michael. You have thousands of people to help, bridges to build between worlds, and a love story to live that will inspire others for generations. Michael clutched the phone, knowing these were truly the last words he would hear from Grace in this form. I love you beyond death, beyond time, beyond every limitation this universe has ever imposed. Take care of our foundation, take care of yourself, and when you're ready, open your heart to love again. I'll be sending you the perfect woman when the time is right. The line went quiet for a long moment, then Grace's original voicemail played one final time. But there was something different about it. At the very end, after her usual message, there was a new addition. P.S. Michael, if you're hearing this, then our impossible love story worked exactly as planned. Thank you for believing in miracles. Thank you for becoming one. The morning after Grace's final communication, Michael woke to a silence that felt different from the devastating emptiness he had experienced in the weeks following her death. This silence was pregnant with possibility, filled with the echo of love that had proven itself stronger than the grave. Grace's phone number was disconnected that day, the carrier having finally terminated the service, but Michael no longer needed to call her. She lived now in the work they had built together. Within a year, the Helen Grace Foundation had grown into an international organization with offices in 12 countries. Dr. Martinez had published groundbreaking research in the Journal of Consciousness Studies, presenting scientific evidence for post-mortem communication that the academic world could no longer ignore. Michael found himself testifying before congressional committees about the therapeutic applications of verified after-death communication, helping to establish new protocols for grief counseling that included the possibility of continued connection with deceased loved ones. But the most profound changes were happening in Michael's daily life. The man who had once built walls around his heart now spent his days helping others tear down the barriers between life and death, between despair and hope, between isolation and connection. The Foundation's headquarters in Denver became a pilgrimage site for people from around the world who had experienced impossible communications from their deceased loved ones. Michael's story had been featured in documentaries, medical journals, and spiritual publications, but he never forgot that the miracle wasn't his ability to communicate with Grace. The miracle was how their love had transformed his grief into a force for healing that touched thousands of lives. Every verified case of after-death communication that came through the Foundation added another thread to the tapestry Grace had envisioned, a growing network of consciousness that spanned both sides of existence. 2 years after Grace's death, Michael was invited to speak at a conference on consciousness survival in Switzerland. It was there that he met Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a neuroscientist studying near-death experiences who had lost her own husband in a climbing accident 3 years earlier. Elena had heard about Michael's work through Dr. Martinez and had traveled from Spain specifically to meet him. Their first conversation lasted 8 hours. Elena had also experienced communication from her deceased husband, though through dreams rather than phone calls. As they compared notes, Michael realized that Grace's prediction about sending him the perfect woman when he was ready was manifesting in the most natural, organic way possible. Elena joined the Foundation as Director of Scientific Research, and over the following months, Michael found his heart opening to love again in a way that honored rather than betrayed his connection to Grace. When Elena moved to Denver, Michael discovered that it was possible to love completely while still cherishing the memory of a previous love. Grace had taught him that the heart wasn't a finite container, but an infinite wellspring that grew larger with each person it embraced. Their wedding took place on a hillside overlooking the mountains Grace had loved, with Dr. Martinez officiating and over 200 families who had been helped by the foundation in attendance. As Michael and Elena exchanged vows, a red-tailed hawk circled overhead, crying out just as Michael said the words, "Until death do us part." Elena smiled and whispered, "Grace approves." The foundation continued to grow, eventually helping over 10,000 families document and understand communications from their deceased loved ones. Michael never received another direct call from Grace, but her presence was felt in every miracle they facilitated, every family they reunited across the veil, every moment when love proved itself stronger than death. 5 years after Grace's transition, Michael was reviewing applications for the Foundation's research grants when he came across a proposal from a young software engineer in Seattle. The man had lost his fiancée in a car accident and had been receiving text messages from her disconnected phone number. The messages contained information he couldn't have known and guidance that was transforming his life. Michael smiled as he approved the funding immediately. Grace's network was expanding. New bridges being built between worlds, new love stories beginning in the space where tragedy and miracle intersected. The work would continue long after Michael himself crossed to the other side, carried forward by an army of people who had learned that consciousness didn't end with physical death. On quiet evenings, Michael would sometimes sit by the window where Grace used to read her books about quantum physics. He would close his eyes and feel her presence, not as the desperate connection of early grief, but as the warm certainty of eternal love. She was still with him, still guiding their work, still weaving the tapestry of connection that would eventually prove to the world that love truly was the force that bound the universe together. The Helen Grace Foundation became Michael's living prayer, his daily practice of gratitude for a love so powerful it had rewritten the rules of existence itself. Grace's final gift hadn't been the ability to communicate from beyond death. Her final gift had been showing Michael that every ending was actually a beginning, every loss a doorway to service, every broken heart an opportunity to help heal the world. And in the Foundation's mission statement, carved in marble in the lobby of their Denver headquarters, were Grace's words from that first impossible phone call. Love doesn't die with the body. It grows stronger, more real than anything we experience in physical form. 10 years have passed since that first impossible phone call, and Michael Davis sits in his office at the Helen Grace Foundation, now the world's leading research center for consciousness survival studies. The walls are lined with photographs of families who have been reunited with their deceased loved ones through documented communications, testimonials from scientists who have verified the impossible, and letters from people whose lives have been transformed by the understanding that love transcends death. On his desk sits Grace's engagement ring, not as a shrine to loss, but as a symbol of love's eternal nature. Next to it is a photo from his wedding to Elena, and beside that, a sonogram image of their unborn daughter, who they will name Hope Grace Rodriguez Davis. Life has come full circle in ways that would have seemed impossible during those dark nights when Michael thought the world had ended with Grace's last breath. Dr. Martinez, now in her 70s, has just published her magnum opus, Consciousness Beyond Death, a scientific investigation featuring case studies from over 50,000 documented communications facilitated through the Foundation. The book has become required reading in psychology and medical programs worldwide, fundamentally changing how the scientific community approaches grief, consciousness, and the possibility of life after physical death. But perhaps the most profound testament to Grace's continuing influence is the ripple effect her story has created across the globe. Grief support. Centers now routinely screen for potential after-death communications. Hospices include consciousness, survival counseling in their care protocols. Medical schools teach courses on the therapeutic applications of verified spirit contact. Grace's impossible love story has become the catalyst for a worldwide shift in how humanity understands the nature of existence itself. Michael has never received another direct call from Grace, but her presence permeates every aspect of his work. In the Foundation's archives are thousands of recordings of deceased loved ones communicating through electronic devices, each one verified by teams of scientists and audio experts. The evidence for consciousness survival is now so overwhelming that even the most skeptical researchers acknowledge that something extraordinary is happening. As Michael prepares to leave the office this evening, his phone buzzes with a text from Elena. "The baby is moving a lot tonight. I think she's excited to meet you." Michael smiles, thinking about how Grace had promised to guide the perfect woman into his life when he was ready. Elena's arrival had been so natural, so obviously orchestrated by invisible hands, that Michael never doubted Grace was keeping her word from beyond the veil. Walking through downtown Denver toward home, Michael passes the coffee shop where he and Grace first met. It's now a small memorial garden with a plaque that reads, "In memory of Grace Chin," and all the love stories that transcend death. Fresh flowers appear there daily, left by people from around the world who have heard their story and found hope in the impossible. Tonight, like every night for the past 10 years, Michael will sit quietly before sleep and feel Grace's presence. Not as a desperate search for connection, but as a peaceful acknowledgement of love that has proven itself eternal. She is woven into the fabric of his new life, blessing his marriage to Elena, guiding the Foundation's work, and preparing to welcome their daughter into a world where miracles are documented reality rather than wishful thinking. The little girl who will be born next month will grow up knowing that consciousness is eternal, that love is the fundamental force of the universe, and that even death cannot separate souls who are truly connected. She will inherit a world forever changed by her spiritual mother's impossible phone calls, a world where grief is understood as a doorway to service and love is recognized as the bridge between all dimensions of existence. Michael's last thought before sleep each night is always the same: a silent thank you to Grace for proving that some love stories are so powerful they rewrite the very laws of reality itself. If you've journeyed with us through Michael and Grace's impossible love story, you've witnessed something that challenges everything our culture teaches us about death, consciousness, and the true nature of reality. Their story isn't just about one couple's transcendent connection. It's about the fundamental truth that love is the most powerful force in existence, capable of bridging any gap, healing any wound, and transforming any tragedy into triumph. Right now, somewhere in the world, there's someone listening to this who has lost someone they can't imagine living without. Someone who feels like their world has ended, like the future they planned has been ripped away forever. If that's you, Grace's message is specifically for you. Your loved one isn't gone. They've simply changed form, and your love for them has the power to create bridges between worlds that science is only beginning to understand. The Helen Grace Foundation continues its work today, documenting new cases of after-death communication every week, proving again and again that consciousness survives physical death. Michael and Elena's daughter, Hope Grace, is now 9 years old, and she carries within her the legacy of a love story that literally changed the world. She grows up knowing that death is not an ending, but a transformation, that grief can become the doorway to the most meaningful service of our lives. Your pain, your loss, your seemingly impossible circumstances are not punishments or mistakes. They are opportunities for you to discover the same truth that Michael learned in those dark nights after losing Grace. When we open our broken hearts in service to others who are suffering, we become channels for miracles that heal not just ourselves, but everyone we touch. The love you shared with your departed loved one isn't lost. It's waiting to be transformed into something even more powerful, something that can reach across dimensions to help, heal, and inspire. Your grief can become your greatest gift to the world, just as Michael's did. The only question is, will you let it?